here we are at Mark Johnson's Flooring, Hartlepool, York Road. Now he's very kindly sponsored the episode today, so let's take a look around, eh? High quality floorings in various colours, shapes and sizes at affordable prices. So what you waiting for? Get yourself down. Local people supporting local businesses.
So if you do end up coming down Mark Johnson's Flooring on York Road in Hartlepool, come in, use the code Davy Robson Podcast and you will get a discount.
Jamie Morgan Kane, take one.
Hello folks and thanks for tuning in. Welcome to another episode on the Davy Robson Podcast. Now we have a really special story for you today and I'm also joined by my brand new co-host. You all know him, Vulture.
Hi guys.
And we've got on my right, the main man himself, Jamie Morgan Kane.
And I really appreciate being invited to come on and meet you guys.
Yeah, brilliant. We're ecstatic. Yeah, honest, we are. We're really excited about it.
Yeah. Really looking forward to this. But with Jamie Morgan Kane's story, it's absolutely mind-blowing. If you haven't seen him on Sean Hatwood and the other podcast, I mean, he's had over 10 million views on YouTube. His story's phenomenal. I mean, from the get-go, day one, his story starts from day one, doesn't it? On the Isle of Man.
Pretty much, it starts shortly after day one, pretty much.
Yeah. I think you were born into the world, I think it was 6 months old. You were?
Well, the thing was, the real part of the story starts a month before I was born. Mm-hmm. A month before I was born, on the 28th of January 1954, my father filed for divorce on the Isle of Man. My father's Roman Catholic, but rather than go for a church divorce, he went through a civil divorce, which when you're on an island of only, at that time, 50,000 people, rumors can spread quickly. Anyway, he filed for divorce and he left the island and never returned. My mom, who had been Church of England before she married him and had converted, she had been basically told by her family that she was dead to them for converting, because that was the time, the times I've learned was that. And but my dad's parents owned the hotel that they worked at and lived at, so my dear sweet grandmother threw her out of the hotel, 8 months pregnant, no job, no home. She can't go back to her family.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, with all that on her and getting ready to have a baby, we believe postpartum depression probably kicked in.
Right.
We were able to find shelter in a hovel off the Hillberry corner of the TT race. There was apparently some hovels there that I understand that elderly women stayed in. They didn't have family, and the government gave them a little stipend to survive on, basically.
Right, yeah.
And a couple of them knew my mom, and she took us in. And I was home birth there. I was midwifed there. And that's what became a problem, is because my mom didn't want to care for me. She basically wouldn't hold me. She was in that mental state.
Yeah.
She did, a week after I was born, have me baptized in my grandparents' parish, St. Anthony's, in hopes that I would be embraced by the family.
Yeah.
But a girl from the hotel named Martha Virginia Boswell, was actually sent by my grandmother to go check on me, and she started caring for me because my mom was incapable of doing it. And then just a few weeks after I had been born, my mom left the island, leaving me on Grandma's doorstep.
Wow.
Well, now my grandmother doesn't want all this going on, because even though my grandparents had married on the island in 1911, had come back in 1919 after being away for just a couple of years because my granddad was a touring variety artist. They were still comers, and they would never be of the island. So rumors easily spread, among the people.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother decided the best thing to do was to get rid of the source of the rumors. If I'm not there, people can't say anything. Oh, he's doing this, he's doing that, he's this, he's that,
Yeah.
So she made arrangements through the church, through the parish, and Father McGrath, to have me sent away. And so at 6 months old, the girl who'd taken care of me, was given a letter of introduction, and the law had changed in 1950 that no British child could be sent away from the UK without permission of the government.
Right.
So what they did is they sent me to Liverpool and hooked me up with 11 children from Ireland. Got put on the boat, and we went from there. But my birth was never registered. I only had my baptism certificate.
Right.
And so we got sent to Canada. We got sent to this place called St. Joseph's Orphan Asylum.
Was that the one that was run by nuns?
It was run by the Grey Nuns of the Cross.
Nuns, wow.
Warm and fuzzy sounding, isn't it? Almost like Sesame Street and the Teletubbies, that type of thing. Yeah. So I was there, and these are the same people and organization that was part of the Duplius orphan scandal that would later come out, where they were selling children to be indentured servants to Canadian farmers. And the idea was the kids, when they turned 18, the farmers were supposed to notify the Canadian government. The kids got their Canadian citizenship, and they would move on with their lives.
Yeah.
Come to find out, thousands of them were never notified to the government, and they were just passed down as part of the farm to the next generations and stuff. And so you had people many years later in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s who had been on the farm and didn't, because all they had to do was feed, clothe, and house them, not educate them. They didn't have, they weren't married, they didn't get children. They were just farm workers.
Just there for work, yeah.
And a lot of the people defended it by saying, "But we took care of them like family. We've taken care of them." But that's not what was supposed to happen. But also, they would adopt children out to people who were looking for children. But if they had a surplus of children, they also ran mental hospitals, both in Canada and America, and they would put perfectly normal children in a mental hospital to get paid by the government, because they get paid different money for that. Now, if you take a perfectly normal 4 or 5 year old child and put him for 50 years in a mental hospital, they will become what they're around.
Exactly.
They will adapt to, they'll have the tics, they'll have the shakes, they'll have because they adapt to survive. Those that don't adapt don't survive.
Right.
And so you end up having, you have these kids that had no right to have their life stolen from. Well, apparently in December of 54, about 4 months after I'd gotten there, I came down with a high fever and cough and stuff, and I went to a hospital. That was the end of the records that we could find from the nuns, and I actually brought their letter for you.
Brilliant, yeah.
I brought that letter for you, including I brought the letter from the priest who, when they were sending me over, saying, "Oh, here's the child. This is what we want to do." So I brought you a copy of that letter as well.
Crazy.
But the girl saw what was happening, and so she stole me. Well, apparently, before my mom left the aisle, she gave her passport and told her when I turned 18 if I wanted to find my way. This is a cookie crumb, basically. And so when we went into America, she took my mom's picture out and put her picture in, and she started using my mom's name because she logically believed that they'd probably be looking for her for stealing a child, but they wouldn't be looking for my mom to have her child.
Yeah, it makes sense,
Yeah. So, and of course, passports back then were different than passports now, and all that. Yeah. It was basically a piece of paper and a picture affixed to it and stuff like that. So she just did. So she took me into America, and to the best that I can understand.
Whereabouts in America were you, sorry, Jim?
Well, we came over from Ottawa, Canada. That's where the orphanage was.
Yeah.
So we would have come into New York because that's right across the border. Now, where exactly we were the whole time, I don't remember. My earliest memory, I was probably about 3. And I remember being in a closet under the stairwell. And I remember hearing all these people yelling and running and stuff like that. And I remember her wrapping me in a blanket and us running out of there into the rain. And then the next memory that I really can vividly say I still hold on to was us being on a bus, driving along on the road, and there was these trees and there was moss hanging off the trees. So I believe the first one, we were somewhere on the east coast of America at the time. The other one, I believe we were somewhere going through Georgia, Louisiana, because that's where the kind of trees down the south. But we ended up in Phoenix, Arizona. And when we first got there, I was introduced to a woman that I would call Grandma Toby. And Grandma Toby was an English woman, a very proper English woman. And I remember her telling somebody at one time that she was born within the sound of Bow bells.
So she's a Cockney.
Well, come to find out, she wasn't Cockney. She was actually from Birmingham.
Ah, right.
The interesting thing is my grandmother was also from Birmingham, but my grandmother poshed out her voice. So when she dealt with Prince Olaf of Norway and these other people, they didn't have this Brummy accent. And we would later find out that Grandma Toby and my grandmother knew each other because her Grandma Toby's dad ran the pub that was less than 100 feet from where my great grandfather would have lived. And the thing is that we honestly believe that Grandma Toby never married, but she had this picture of a man in uniform down on the wall. And we believe that was my grandmother's younger brother who went missing during the war.
Right.
So there was this kind of weird bond situation. And but Grandma Toby would always tell people that tell Martha when Martha would have other children, and she'd come and she goes, "They're not mine. He's mine." So she claimed me, but she wouldn't claim any of these other kids.
Right.
And Martha was Irish. Martha was part of the Boswell Gypsy clan that used to camp on Douglas Head and from the 1830s on. They do the fairs and the horses and all that and stuff. And Martha would tell me things when I was a little kid that, like I said, I thought she was my mom. So but the thing was, she would tell me little things like that when I was just after I'd been baptized, she took me down to the Douglas Bay, and she put a piece of sand in my mouth and a drop of seawater, and then held me up into the fog, which we call Mahanan's cloak, the sea god's cloak, and so that I would be bound to the island. It would always call me home, right? Which, in a funny way, I've been bound to the island, and I always been called home. But then she told me when I was probably 7, maybe a little earlier. Whenever she wanted me to remember something, she'd go, "Remember, remember, remember." And then I would focus because I know this is something important. Yeah. And she told me, "You're a man of the isle, a son of a sea, and brother of the storm." And she went to explain that I was born on the Isle of Man, so I'm a man of that isle. I'm a son of the sea because Mahana McLear is the sea god. All the people born on the isle are his children. And that I was a brother of the storm, she says, because she could see in my life I would have lots of conflicts and difficulties. But because I'm a brother of the storm, I would weather them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because the storm is always, I don't have to worry about the storm. I am with it. It's my brother. So and like I said, when you're telling a little kid these things, and you tell them you're from a magical, mystical isle that disappears sometimes so people can't find it. Yeah, you know, and when you talk about the little people, and you talk about the Finna-Dee and the Mothy-Doo, and you talk about these things, for a little kid who really doesn't have, I mean, you don't have a dad, you don't have, you know, you start doing that. And then, of course, she pointed out that we have 3 legs on our symbol. And that's because wherever we were thrown, we would stand. One foot's always on the ground, and then on my arm. You know, so for me, this became the building blocks of who I would become. Yeah, and as I've told a lot of people, you know, part of the thing is I've had, you know, people say, well, why? How were you able to stay, you know, mentally strong and stuff like that? And I told them, because I got to a point where so many people didn't know about the Isle of Man, even educated people. And I had people tell me, oh, there's no such place. And I'd have to prove it to them, right? And then they'd come off and say, oh, well, they must have recently named one of the Hebrides Islands that, you know. Or they'd say, well, is there an Isle of Women? And I tell them, actually there is, Chirnaban. Chirnaban means land of women, and that was what the Isle of Skye was called at one time in ancient times. And so I would tell them this, right? And they'd all go, oh, you know, this type of thing. But I told them the whole thing was, in my mind, you might never meet another Manxman. So I carry the weight of my nation on my shoulders. So I have to represent my nation as honestly, as truthfully, as strongly, as honestly as I can, because I may be the only one you meet. And you could say, oh, I heard about them people. Yeah, I met one. And this is how he was. So I had to try very hard not to shame my nation, basically, kind of.
Right.
You understand that you know.
Yeah.
So for me, that was part of the thing. So, you know, even when I went inside, you know, you'd have people that would have like tattooed, like we had a guy and he had Lodi, which is a little town in California, tattooed on his belly. And I said, oh, you're from Lodi? And he goes, oh, well, no, I was born in New York. I said, oh. And he goes, but I was raised in Kentucky. And he goes, but then I was living in Texas before I just came out for a holiday in Lodi, and I got busted for drugs.
Right.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why do you have Lodi on there? He goes, well, because that's where I got busted. I said, but you're not from there. And he goes, well, no, but those are the guys I'm hanging out with now. So he didn't claim any of the place he was from. He just claimed the place he just landed at the last minute. You know, and so it was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense, you know, type thing. Yeah. So for me, there was that kind of deal. But so that's kind of the thing. But I grew up there, and Martha would take me away every once in a while, and then she'd drop me off, and she'd be gone for months and months on end sometimes. But I got dropped off one time at an Indian reservation with a lady. She did cleaning with, because she was trained in civil service as well, and she also had domestic stuff. So she'd work for her families and clean their houses, and work their parties and stuff.
Yeah.
And periodically I got dropped off Indian reservations, which of course, looking like me with blue eyes and my color skin, you would think I would stand out, right?
You would have stood out. Yeah.
But there was one on one of the reservations I was on. We had an Indian police officer, and
they have their own police forces. And stuff.
They have their own little police force, but it's not like a police force like you'd think.
Right.
First off, the only gun they carried was a Winchester rifle, and that was usually to kill an animal that had been injured, right? They usually carried a big Bowie knife and stuff. And the one guy, he wore a big black, what they call reservation hat, beaded band, and he rode this great big Appaloosa horse. Right. And he'd ride up to us, and he'd always call us things like sand diggers and stuff like that. And he would throw sand diggers, and he used to throw jawbreaker candies. They're not wrapped up. He would throw them into the dirt, and of course, we'd all go get them, you know, because we don't get candy that often, you know. But anyway, so that was like my first intro into law enforcement, was this guy. And every time we saw him, we knew we were going to get candy. I mean, covered in sand. But I mean, eventually, there came a time when Martha came to get me, and they packed my little suitcase like always, except this time Grandma Toby gave me a watercolor that she had done. She gave me a watch that had this fob on it that had like a lion's head on it and stuff. And basically, it was almost like you knew this was like
You could sense there was
something's wrong. But I'm not being told anything. And then she gave me a really, really big, deep hug, deeper than normal. I mean, she always gave me good hugs, but this one was like even more so.
How old were you at this point?
I was at this time I was 14, but I was small for my age, because quite honestly I didn't eat well except when I was at Grandma Toby's, and I mean she used to make me little soldiers and eggs. Yeah, and she'd make me porridge.
It's my favorite, actually.
Yeah, and she'd make me porridge, and the big treat was we'd get milk bottles dropped off, and they had the plug of cream on the top, and she'd scoop it off and throw it in my porridge.
Yeah.
I mean, these little things like
things
this.
That you remember as well.
Yeah, and but when I was with her, it was just I was always felt loved. I always felt safe. And it wasn't like. I didn't get in trouble and she didn't punish me, but I wasn't a bad child. But the thing about her is that she educated me because I didn't go to school. I didn't go to my first school till I was 14. But she taught me geography and language and writing and reading and math. And
she taught me all the basics.
All the basics. Yeah. But we only had a radio. We didn't have a TV. We had a radio and a record player. So I would listen to all this music. And we would sit there, and then she would tell me about places, and stuff. And so I had a really great. One of the first books I ever remember reading that she gave me was King Arthur and the Round Table.
Yeah.
And then Ivanhoe was another one she gave me to read. Robin Hood. And she was, and she. Yeah. But so what was funny is, when I left her, we went and we stayed in this hotel for a couple of nights, and then one day. Martha got me up. We went and got on the bus, and she put me in my best clothes, which I didn't have much in the way of clothes, but put me in my best clothes. And when we got off the bus, it was like really quiet because she usually talked to me and she wasn't talking to me. And then she did what mothers did back then. I had a cow lick, and I had probably some dirt on my face, and she used mother's spit to clean your face because that's an all-purpose cleaner, and then get my cow lick to stay down. And then we went, and we were going to a place called Carnation Ice Cream Shop, and you go in and it's just all kinds of ice cream. Right. And that's something, again, not a treat that I got on any kind of regular basis. Yeah. And I was introduced to this couple, Dr. Charles Wetmore and his wife Alice.
Yes. Yeah.
And Martha says, I've got to speak to them, so we're going to have you sit over here. And Alice, the wife, says, and you can order anything you want off the menu. I said, okay. And she walked me over and sat me down and get the menu and tells the lady to let me have one. And you open it up, and back then, they had really colorful pictures of all these different things. And you're a little kid, and you're like,
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I saw was a lime freeze.
Yeah.
And green, and it had the frost, the whipping on it, had cherries on it and stuff. And I want that. Yeah. And so I'm eating that, and they're over there, and every once in a while, I see them glance over at me. They're talking about me, right? Yeah. But I'm eating my thing because funny enough, I actually think they're going to come take it from me. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm thinking maybe they think it's too big, too much, or they're going to come take this. So they're not getting this, right? And I don't know how long, half an hour, maybe a little bit, maybe a little longer. They came over, and Martha says, I'm going to be going away, and you're going to be staying with these people for a while, and I want you to be good for them, and I'll come back. And she used to always tell me I'll be back, and she always did come back. So I didn't have a reason not to believe her, right? And then I remember the guy grabbing my arm and saying, come on, we've got to get going, and he grabbed my bag, and he kind of like, squeezed my arm, right?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, y'all, I'm only probably about this time, I'm probably only about 5 foot, maybe 2.5, 3. So I'm really short, right? But I'm not liking being manhandled because sometimes Martha had men in her life that would manhandle her, and I'd go and jump in the middle of it and get bounced off walls and stuff. But it didn't stop me from getting up and trying again, that type of thing. Yeah. So I already had that kind of heart in my chest. So anyway, take me out to the car, and it was a brand new '68 Plymouth Fury of some nature, big car, and so we drive off. I go to their house, and that night they tell me, "Well, we're adopting you," which I didn't really understand. They said, "Well, we're going to be keeping you, and we're giving you a new identity, and you're going to be our son from now on."
Wow.
I said, no, Mom's coming back. She says, no, she just didn't want you to be upset when she left, but you're never going to see her again. Well, now you've just upset me.
Yeah.
So I start arguing. So I get put in a bedroom, and there's that lock on the outside of the door.
Oh, no.
And we spent, I think it was just about 2 weeks. I never left that house.
So whereabouts was this house?
It was in Phoenix, Arizona. It was actually in an area part of Phoenix called Tempe.
Right.
It was a little suburb of it, but it's Phoenix still. He had just graduated the university with his doctorate degree in business administration. And I remember the morning before we left, he took a photo of us as a family. They had a little girl they had adopted as well. And they took a picture of us, and the little girl looked at me and says, "You're not my John." And I don't know what the hell that meant, but the boy's name they gave me was John. Right? But she had been apparently adopted with this other child. They were not from the same family, but they were adopted basically together or close together. And his initial name was John Raymond Fry, and they became John Raymond Wetmore. So when they gave me mine, they said John Raymond Wetmore. Then they gave me his social security number. And then they gave me his birth date.
So they just made you up.
They just changed me over, right?
Yeah, made you up, yeah.
Wow.
And so the thing was that he had been born in 56. I had been born in 54.
Right. So
Right.
Yeah.
And so they just, well, we're just going to do it. And then we got in the car and we drove. We drove to Fresno. And schools were right from the house, right across like the street and down a little bit. And life just, in their mind, was normal. And to me, I did. And then I remember hearing one time when they had just mentioned the fact that she wouldn't find me because they told her that we were going to a different place.
So
and I didn't at the time. At the time, I didn't realize exactly what they were talking about. But in that affidavit I've got for him, they told her we were moving to El Paso, and we went to Fresno, California. And of course, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have
so to change your name.
And you just and people and basically they take me in and they register me in school and were his parents and they used his adoption papers for ID for me. And so but the man and I we never got along, to say the least.
Yeah.
The first thing he did was he went through my suitcase and he took all my prized possessions out of there, my watch, the painting, and he said, "I think you might have stolen these. I'm going to take them and put them in safekeeping." And I had a little brass motorcycle that was my toy, and I'd had that since I was about 5 years old. And it was a little rider on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And it was my first motorcycle thing. And he took all these from me, and he put them in his safe deposit box in his bank. And then
did you ever get them back?
Well, I never got the watch back, and I never got the painting back. Funny enough, just about a year ago, I got a letter anonymously, postmarked from the Isle of Man, that said, "We found this when we went through our aunt's belongings, getting ready to put stuff in the charity shops. We remembered seeing this when we were little kids. It was a white envelope that said James on it, had an old dull yellow string wrapped around it, and inside was my little motorcycle rider. And it said, we were told that Grandma had received this back, but Granddad had sent it to a little boy who had left here, and he'd been sent through to Liverpool, and said we were always told if we were bad we'd be sent to Liverpool. Liverpool's where everybody got shipped out from, to Australia, to Hong Kong, to South Africa. That was like the gates of hell, basically. But it was used as a threat, apparently, to kids.
Right.
So I got there and they said, we think that this belongs to you. And we think maybe this is why it took so long for you to get home, because you didn't have this. So, but it was that bike. And they said, but please don't contact us or try to contact us, because parts of the family would not appreciate that me doing this. So please don't stir up anything. But I've got it back now. I was going to bring it this morning, but unfortunately, I got a little.
What a Jamie, that motorcycle.
Here's the thing. What we believe happened, and I do have this for you. 1971. Apparently, Dr. Wetmore, I was 17, apparently had written to my grandmother on the aisle. Okay, because he learned a lot about me through Martha and about my grandparents, and he had all this information. That's what he wrote in the affidavit. And what we believe is he contacted her. And we believe he sent her that motorcycle as proof of life or proof of identity, right? Because what we've discovered is that motorcycle was never a toy. That motorcycle used to be a corkscrew, and my grandparents owned hotels with bars in them. Right. And that was made in 1954 for the Isle of Man hotels because of the TT races.
So
and the corkscrew had been cut off, and it was sent to me. And so we believe Grandma got it back then. We don't know what she was told by him, but we got a copy of her letter, which is one of the things I'm going to leave to.
Really?
And she says, yes, the child you have is the son of my son Douglas, but he's ill and unable to care for children. But he was sent away for the good of the family, and we would rather not have anything to do with him. Okay, so that's all kind of fine dandy. It's a little short letter, but my grandmother signs it and everything. This is May of 71. September of 71, in the Manx newspaper, a full-page article gets done celebrating my grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. And even the Queen sends her congratulations. And in the article, it says that, unfortunately, our son, Douglas, was unable to attend because he's ill. It's 5 months after that letter she sent. It says his daughter, who was a confectioner, made a cake for us for our anniversary. And our only grandson, Paul, has just got his O levels. Now, wait a minute. She only had one granddaughter. And they say their only granddaughter. But in that article, they made it very specific, their only grandson. This is only 5 months after they've been notified about me. Now, if that didn't raise red flags to people, because why would you say only if there's only one anyway? You did unlike the first one. Oh, our grandson.
Our grandson,
yeah. But because you said our only, very specifically. So when I got these articles, which were much later, I didn't get these articles till like less than 10 years ago, and started putting all this together. So it's been things where pieces come together. Yeah. But kind of what really brought my downfall was basically 1978, I was going through a divorce with my wife, my first wife, and we had a son. And when she left us when he was 9 months old, and said, look, I'm tired of being a mom, I'm tired of being a wife, I want to be a daughter again, I'm going home to my mom, you wanted him, he's yours, and we're done. And she left. Well, that was all right. I have my son, and so I'm focusing on this. Well, in 78, her parents pressured her to file for divorce and get custody of him. Okay? So, I'm living in Fresno. I'm living in San Diego. I suddenly get an invite to come for dinner and discussion by Dr. Wetmore. So, I'm riding with a bike club. I get a couple of partners. We ride up there on our bikes. And I go meet him at the door, right? And he sees I brought people with him. I just want to talk to you. I said, yeah, but we were just going to go for a ride anyway. So he talks to me at the door. He doesn't let me in the house. And he said, well, here's the deal. You never allowed me to raise you the way I wanted you to be raised. I said, no, I didn't like what you wanted to do to me. Yeah. And he goes, so here's the deal. Your wife is filing divorce. And so he knew all this before I told him. And he goes, I have the connections, the finances and stuff that I can make sure she doesn't get him. but only on the grounds you give me parental rights to me, so I can raise him. And she goes, I'll raise him to become a doctor or a lawyer. I might even change his name to Lincoln Alban, so if he becomes a lawyer, his initials spell law and things like this and stuff. I'll send him to the finest schools and, all the, and I'm like, I didn't like you. And I didn't.
Is this Dr.
Did do a good job with you.
Yeah.
Did he? Obviously,
So I told him, so we're not in this thing, so I'm not going to do it. And he goes, you son of a bitch. And he runs back in the house, and my friend goes, he's going to go get a gun. He's going to get a gun right now. He's going to shoot you. That's what he could do. But he didn't. He came back, and he had an envelope, and he threw it at me and told me, he goes, you're not my son. You're not even an American. Get off my property. Don't ever come back. And slammed the door. So we're standing there. I got this envelope. I tuck it in my vest. We get on the bikes. We go back down. We stop at a little restaurant in Bakersfield. And open it up. There's my mom's passport. And there's my baptism certificate. Well, prior to that, I never had anything tangible that actually said I was from the Isle of Man. Or even though I was from the UK. Up till that point, I was always the stories. So, and of course, sounding like me and looking like me, reading, So,
This Dr. Wetmore sounds very controlling.
Very, very much so. And he like so when you read his affidavit, you'll probably do your own little thing about I read this thing and this is because you're probably gonna because it took me 3 tries to read through it initially because I get so angry about things he was saying and stuff. Because he partially the way he says that he got the information from Martha is that he knew she liked to drink and he plied her with gin and got her to where she would talk more and stuff like that.
manipulative.
Yeah, and he was very manipulative.
Was he physically abusive?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. He used to take me out and have me hold this tree in the back, and he'd beat me with a belt around my legs and back and stuff. And the problem that he used to get was that I wouldn't cry for him. But the last time he did that to me, he severely beat me to the point where my knees buckled and I was on the ground. And we stepped back, and he goes, you learned your lesson yet? And I stood up, dragged myself to my feet, and I looked at him and said, is that the best you got? And he backed away, went in and slid the sliding glass door, and I could hear him tell Alice, there's something wrong with that boy.
It's having no effect on him at all.
And that was the last time you ever...
That was the last time he ever beat me like that. But shortly after that, we had this big hoodoo, and he knocked me down. He kicked me in the stomach and ruptured my appendix. And when I got to the hospital, he's telling that, a couple of big kids beat me up and hurt me, And I'm telling him, no, he did it. And they're going, and Alice is like, well, he's confused because he was so frightened and that he doesn't know what he's saying. And of course, Wetmore has friends in the police department. Wetmore has friends in the
connected as well, yeah.
So because like I said, his best friend was Richard Nixon, the president of the United States. And like I said, G. Gordon Liddy, one of the Watergate plumber guys, used to come by the house regular to get him and take him places and stuff. And there were other people that would show up that I never knew who they were, but it's kind of like the idea. The funny thing was when Men in Black came out, I started saying, that's what he was getting. He kept getting Mibs to come over because most of them came in dark suits, black suits, gray suits, dark blue suits. Nobody came in just Tijuana tire tread sandals and surfer shorts. No, they all came in suits. They all came in cars. A lot of time were chauffeur driven.
Obviously, very important people.
Yeah, so they were very important people, very connected people. So, but again, I didn't like the guy, so every chance I could, when he was busy with people, I'd just get away. I just had no interest in the man. Yeah. But anyway, so when I refused to do that, he joined the other side, and he made sure my wife would get my son from me. And it was probably the lowest time in my life because, for the first time I kind of really felt alone because at that point I've been raising my son.
How old were you at this point?
Well, so we're talking 78, so I'm 24.
Right.
But I've been raising my son by myself for almost a year. Yeah. I mean, I took him on my motorcycle. I know people are going to probably complain about that. I had a collapsible type stroller that would strap to my sissy bar. I had him on a pouch on my front. I had inside my vest, I had bottles and nappies and burp wraps, and I would take them place with me to my shop. I had a big playpen. I was going to college, doing some study. I'd take them in, and the slope in the classroom was just enough where I could put him in the stroller and set him down, and it was just perfect. Put a bottle, and he was good.
Yeah.
And was like, I'm all good with this. I can deal with this.
You're doing okay, yeah.
Took it from me, and I had a friend. It's the only time in my life that I ever got drunk. I had a friend who owned a pub, and I used to go there and I'd do bouncing for him from time to time. And I went in there, and he knew I'd lost, and he said, "Well, here, drinks are on me."
So they did take your son?
Oh yeah, they took my son. Because what happened was, this was what ripped my heart out. They had done like social work reports for me and my wife's. Because the thing was, there had been a police report when she had abandoned my son. Because when she initially abandoned him, she left him out in the yard while I was at work in a Jolly jumper. And he was partially sunburned. Ants had been biting on him. And the neighbors called because he was crying. And the police and social workers arrived minutes after I did. I was taking care of my son. I was putting burn cream on him. But there was a note. They saw the note and they said, so they did this these reports on us. And they put down that she was immature. She was selfish. She was non-maternal. They had all these different things about her. Abandonment of a child, bringing harm to the child, leaving him out in the weathering and stuff. And they put down with mine was I had been diagnosed with PTSD from combat relation thing. Okay, that's so that when the judge made his decision, and I'm going to tell you, I had a gun permit at the time. Okay. I was allowed to carry a concealed weapon. But I didn't take the concealed weapon to court because you don't do that kind of thing in a law-abiding. But I had one of my club brothers sitting there with me, and we had the little attorney represent me. And the judge said, that this is a terrible situation. But when I have to make a decision between giving a child to a bad, neglected mother who has family that will support her, or to a doting, loving father who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, I have to give it to the mother. Yeah. And it seriously felt like somebody reached in my heart, my chest, grabbed my heart, and ripped it out. And my club brother was with me, said that nobody else noticed, but my first thing was I went for my gun. I actually put my hand where my gun would have been. Yeah, and he said it's a good thing it wasn't there. He says because my son was in the room just outside the courtroom, and I would have left with my son that day. Yeah. And he said, but you went like that, and he goes, and then I grabbed you, and he goes, but we went to the friend pub and the guy says, look, the drinks are on me, and I sat there throwing back whiskey. Shot after shot, and I'm not a whiskey drinker. And I don't remember really much for about 3 days. And basically what happened is I would drink myself into a stupor, and then they just pushed me under one of the tables, and I slept there all night, and I'd get up the next day and I started doing it again. And finally on the third day, the guy basically had a couple of my other club brothers there said, look, I'm going to have to bar you from this place, kick you, because you're going to die. If you don't stop.
Yeah, you're just trying to black it all out.
And so that was like the worst time of that I had. So I got out, and then the thing is but the only addiction I've ever had in my life is motorcycles. Yeah. And I used to tell people I eat, drink, sleep, motorcycles. If you cut me, I'd bleed 60 weight oil. Yeah. And
I've seen quite a bit of your footage and your stuff on YouTube where you absolutely love your motorbikes. That's all your...
And the thing was that I went for, so I get out, I end up meeting this other gal through a friend of mine. It was her niece. And not intending to get with her, it just, situations happen type thing. Yeah. Her parents were Jehovah's Witnesses. She wasn't being a good Jehovah's Witness. They sent her up to be with her aunt and uncle, who were by far the wrong people to send them up to because they were as far away from Jehovah's Witnesses as you could get. But, I mean, he was a guy named Dusty, and, if he was back in the Appalachians, he'd be a hillbilly, but in California he wasn't. but he had a tow truck, and if your car broke down and you weren't there for half an hour, he'd have it scrapped within an hour. You know, and he was, you know, but to him, he was doing ecology stuff, getting that crap off the road, you know, and making a living doing, you know, that kind of thing, you know, kind of a, you know, a steptoe and son type thing, just, you know, scrapping stuff.
Going back to your son, did you get visitation or whatever?
Well, here's what they did. They gave me unlimited visitation, but she had full custody. Yeah. I lived in San Diego. She lived in San Jose. Which is about 700-mile drive.
Distance,
right? So the thing was, what I was told to do is, if you want to see him, you call up, and then she'll have him, you know, let her know, and then you can come up. And I did that. And I would drive up there, and I'd get all the way up there, and she'd go, "Oh, his uncle took him this weekend. Oh, his grandmother took him." Oh, and we played this game, and I actually called the district attorney's office and stuff, said, "Look, this has got to quit." And he said, "Here's the problem. If she violates the order, it's a civil affair, and you have to take it back to the court.
Yes.
But if you go up there and take the child, it becomes a criminal matter." I said, "You know, you guys are making this thing where if I have to draw a line in the sand, it's going to be bad, you know." And then she got kind of worried that I was going to come take him at some point, and she disappeared. I couldn't find her, and I found out years later she'd married another Navy guy and went to Japan. I mean, you know,
Find her in Japan either.
I wouldn't have found her in Japan. You know, I mean, first off, she wasn't the type of person who liked that kind of, you know, cultural stuff.
Any contact with your son now?
No, here's what did happen. I did have some contact. When he was 19, he contacted me, and
Right.
I was in prison. He contacted me because basically, he had basically been told I had died, and then he got into a big family argument one time. And somebody said, "No, he's alive, but he's in prison." So they got in this big thing. So get in touch with me. So he was in touch with me for a while until I got my deportation order put on me. And he suddenly got all weird about, "Well, what do you mean you're going to be deported? How can you be deported? You're an American. You were born in Phoenix, Arizona." No, Phoenix, Arizona is where the other kid had been born. Yeah. That I'd been given the identity of. Yeah. So I'm telling him, but his mom's telling him, no, your dad's lying to you. He's born in Phoenix, Arizona, blah, 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 blah. You know, and she goes, "I've got a good authority from Dr. Wetmore, blah, 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 blah," right? Okay.
Dr. Wetmore again.
And so anyway, so he just cuts communication with me.
Okay.
And I don't hear from him again until after I get back over here. And the people I was with in London, they had had a few contacts with him type thing. I don't know exactly how that had come about, but they'd gotten you know, had a few like email type things. And they told me, "You need to contact him." And I said, "Well, the last contact I'd had with him was when he took breaking off. I said, if you're not in my life before I leave, you won't be in my life after I leave. It's real simple." Yeah. But okay, so I do. So I send this thing. So the next thing I get is that, "Oh yeah, I had just made arrangements to come out and visit you. I got rented a hotel and I rented a car and all this stuff, and I was going to be coming out and see you in a month. And you just go and leave the country." Wait a minute. You haven't been in touch with me in more than 9 years or whatever, you know, like. Yeah. And now suddenly I'm the bad guy, right? And then the next one was, "Does this mean I'm a dual citizen? Do I get British citizenship out of this?" So I don't know. You'll have to check on that yourself. Okay. So then when I did the Sean Atwood thing, then he came off and he started yelling at me about, "Oh man, you're disrespecting these people and this people, and you shouldn't be doing that. You need to apologize." And then he said that Sean and I should commit suicide because, you know, we were basically worthless pieces of shit and and all this stuff, right? And then he became one of the trolls that I had to deal with. Yeah. But he went under another name thing, and he would call in and says, "Yeah, and he would try to, you know, blacksmith. So anyway, I did my DNA. Well, he had done his DNA. Our DNAs don't match.
You're joking.
And what we've come to find out is basically he's Dr. Wetmore's son through my wife having an affair with. That's why Dr. Wetmore wanted him. Because Dr. Wetmore wanted nothing to do with my other son, my young son that I had from my second marriage. But he wanted this one. He knew. And we've got pictures of Dr. Wetmore at different times through his life and pictures of this kid, and they look identical. There's not a doubt in my mind. But the thing was is that
some people can't even look at
but he was saying, yeah, he's an American, and he started this thing that a lot of people picked up about. That I tricked the American government into deporting me. I tricked the British government into believing and accepting me. Now, think about this for a minute. I'm in prison for 34 and a half years. I went into prison when cassette players was the top of the line technology. Yeah. Okay? Yet it's been argued that I forged all these federal documents that I have. I forged all the British documents I have. And everybody accepted them on face blank. Funny enough, if you're in prison and you walk up to your counselor and you go, oh, by the way, I've got this document. I need you to put this in my file. They go, no, it has to come through an official source.
Yeah.
I've got some of I don't have them all, but I have some of the copies of the envelopes that the things came in.
You brought them with you?
I brought some of those with me.
Yeah.
But some of the things had gotten lost because a lot of times the staff would throw the envelopes away after you got the thing. But I have some. So the idea is, not only am I supposed to have forged the documents and all the seals and the stamps and all the signatures, I'm supposed to have forged the envelopes and the postage things, and all while sitting in my cell.
Yeah, I think what we'll do there, we'll photograph them.
Yeah, we'll stick them on for you.
Yeah.
What
Put them on.
What I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, we've got to rewind on your story a little bit with Dr. Wetmore. Obviously, he's abusive towards you. And how was your life at school and things like that when you were living with this family? As a growing up as a child.
Well, I had my first motorcycle I got when I was about 15, and it was a Honda 305 Dream.
Good old doctor.
And I argued with Dr. Wetmore about getting one, and he kept telling me I couldn't have one until my last birthday. And then he sat down to tell me a story about why. Was that when he was just through his flight school, him and his buddy, they went out and they bought Indian Chiefs back in the 40s. And they went out for a ride on a cold New England morning with frost on the road and snow lightly falling and stuff. And they had been drinking, and they came around a corner a little too fast, and the bike that his buddy was on went off the road, and his buddy went through a barbed wire fence and was decapitated.
All right,
so he stopped. So the motorcycles killed the guy. And I tried to tell him, no, that you're being stupid and drinking. Which that was actually the incident that got me kicked over in a lot of people, was because of the fact I told them that they were just stupid. But anyway, behind that, because of all the foo-fa behind the injury and stuff, it was finally agreed that I could have one, but I couldn't bring one home until it was running. And there was a man who had a whole garage full of Honda 305s. And I went there, and the guy let me pick out parts, and I paid him, and I had to leave it there, so I had to pay him rent for the place. I had to rent his tools and all this stuff like that. But the guy actually started realizing I really wanted this thing, so he started helping me out. Oh, I just happened to find this new set of pistons. I just happened to find this, and things like that. And then after I got it all together, all the money I paid him for the bike, he gave it back to me so that I would have it to enjoy it. But when I first brought it home, I was told I couldn't keep it because and then Wetmore told the guy, because the guy came with me, says, I told you never to let that bike run. And the guy says, yeah, his heart was in it too much. I couldn't betray him. Yeah. So then Wetmore was like, but this guy was more of a rough and tumble type guy than Wetmore. Yeah. Wetmore's the kind that will sign something to have somebody else do it to you. Yeah. But he's not going to do it himself. So anyway, I couldn't keep the bike there. So the guy let me keep it at his house, and I'd go over there and get it and ride it and stuff. And then my first car was a 1956 Chevy Bel Air 2-door hardtop with a 1956 Corvette 265 in it with two barrels on it, the 6-pack they call it. Nice. And I got it from the original owner. But when I got it, the engine was in the trunk of the car. and we lived right across from my high school. And so when I got it, I got 3 friends to help me push it while I steered it. And we called the shop teacher, and he opened up so we could take it right in. And we built it in my high school as a shop project and stuff. So the time away from the house was pretty good to me.
Pretty normal. So.
And then what ended up happening is I met some grown men bikers in Fresno, and I had my little 305, and it's black and silver, so it's looking cool, If you ever watched Grease 2, that's pretty much what a lot of them were riding. But it looked cool for a 15, 16-year-old kid. It's like, But I hadn't turned 16 yet. I was getting ready to turn 16, and I was friends with these biker guys. And they used to let me come out to the clubhouse and clean their bikes and run errands for them and stuff like that. Yeah. And I got to hang out with them, which is cool because they're accepting me. And they're not treating me...
They're treating you as an adult.
They're treating me more as an adult, and they're being very, it was funny because if you look back on it, like, here, take the soap and water and go wash my bike. Okay, so I'm doing a job for them, but all of them would always slip me a little bit of coin on the side, and stuff. But they wouldn't say, you're, because I was too young to be any of that, but don't tell anybody, this is between us. And I had that same really with almost everybody in the club. Yeah. And then there was one guy that says, hey, look, I need to rebuild my carburetor. Would you help me? Well, yeah. Okay, takes it all apart. So go clean these parts. Comes back and says, now, Hal, this is how we put it together. And they start, we're going to change these brakes shoes. So I started learning.
So it's sort of got like an apprenticeship.
Yeah, kind of an apprenticeship thing. And then there was going to be a big party up at the lake, and I was over at their house because I used to hang out at theirs just to stay away from Wetmore, and which was good. Wetmore didn't care. Basically, he didn't want me to be a problem, type thing. And I stayed over, and it was a couple days before this run up to the thing, and I come out to get on my bike to go home, and my bike is gone. It's missing. There's all these Harleys there, and my Honda has been stolen. All right? And I tell, man, my bike's been taken. Oh, man, that's fucked up, man. Oh, brother, man, that's a terrible thing. And they're all giving me this, this support about how terrible. Oh, we're going to find out who did that, and And I'm feeling good about the fact I got the support. I'm not feeling good about I don't have a bike. So they end up taking me home that night. I'm like, oh. And then when the ride's going, I go, I don't have a bike to ride. I said, okay, we're going to let you ride in the truck. They have like a chase truck that comes on. Oh, man. Because that's driven by one of the girls. It's like, oh, man, I don't want to go there. And so we go up there, and we're walking around. There's like all this stuff. And they got there's like little stalls, people selling feathered earrings and, chain link belts and all the, this stuff. And we walk over, and there's this bike sitting there, this Sportster, and the guy goes, "Wow, that's pretty cool." Says, "What do you like that?" I said, "Well, yeah, but it ain't mine." And the guy said, "That's all I need to hear." He pulled out and he goes, "And here's the money." And he paid the guy because it was for sale. He goes, "It's yours now." And it was a '62 Sportster, right? Come to find out, they took my bike and sold my bike to get the extra money to finish buying my Sportster for me, right? But because I'm still so light in the weight, because now I'm probably about 2 inches taller, I'm probably pushing, just getting to about 5'5", but I still only weigh, probably at that time, about 140 pounds tops, right? And this is an XLCH. It's a kickstart only. There's no electric starts, because back in the day, you could tell a real biker by the size of his right thigh, not the thickness of the callus on his thumb.
So push button now, isn't it?
So when they realize, they go ahead and kick it. So I get up there and I jump down on it, and the first time I couldn't get it. And the guy put both feet on it, and I jump, and it shoots me over the handlebar, because of the kickback. So they go, well, we're going to fix that. So we had to take it back in the truck because I couldn't get it started. They started it for me, so I got to putt around a little bit, but I couldn't ride it. It's definitely going to. So the kick pad on a Harley is only about this wide, coming along. So they went and custom made me one this long, so I could put both feet on it.
Right.
And one of the girls took a couple pairs of denim jeans and sewed 5-pound weights bar weights, sewed them in my back pockets to give me the extra weight. And even then, a number of times I'd get thrown over the handlebars.
Yeah.
But I've got my Harley,
Yeah.
And
do you have any photos?
Huh?
Do you have any photos of Harley back at home? Yeah.
I don't have any of the Sportsters. I do have my '78 shovel. I've got one of me in 1980 on my panhead. I've got I might have a couple others.
Yeah.
But most of the photos, unfortunately, when I had a lot of photos in prison, but then they came out with a rule you could only have this many photos.
Oh, yeah.
And if you had more, they could take them and just scrap them. So I actually had sent them to that boy that I thought was my son. And he never sent them back to me, even though I told him make copies. And then when I got over here, send me some photos, and he wouldn't send. So I only have some of the ones I was able to hold on to. I do have a picture of a Honda 554 that I had built for somebody else that has my youngest son sitting on it. And he thinks it's his bike, and stuff, because I was getting involved in this stuff.
When we were younger, I mean, there's not many photographs of me as a child. There wasn't a done thing.
Well, I'm lucky enough. I have one photo of me at about age 5, and we're all dressed to go somewhere. I have no idea where we're going, and I'm sitting there looking at my motorcycle in my hand. I've got my little bike, and so I've got that, and everybody else is looking at the camera, and I'm like, So that's my youngest picture. Then I got a picture that I found online of me sitting in my school lunchroom that they took for like the album, the school yearbook. There's one photo of me I got like that. And then I've got photos of me. Predominantly, I've got one photo of me in my Navy uniform, sitting with my mother-in-law at the time. And then I've got photos of with my first wife, and then I've got the photos with my, a few after that. And then most of the photos I got are from prison, because they used to have a photographer on the yard that we could get photos taken. So I've got a number of photos from inside prison.
So see, like you say, we're breaking that now, if you don't mind, Jamie.
No.
You, in the motorcycle club, you ended up in the armed forces, like you just mentioned there.
Yeah.
How did that come about, if you don't mind?
Because it was kind of the thing is that I had a lot of friends that were going in the service, Vietnam era. It was Vietnam time. Vietnam still going on. Richard Nixon's president, because he was still 72 and stuff like that. And Vietnam went to 75, even though most of the pullout came in 73. Okay.
It was still going on, wasn't it?
It went all the way through 75. The last, the beginning of 75, is when they did there in Saigon with the helicopters lifting people off and all that kind of stuff. So what happened was, because when I went to school, I had been so better educated, I actually got accelerated in studies. So I moved up grades.
Right.
So I was graduating when I should have graduated on my type thing. So I was looking like I was younger, but I was getting on. But the thing was that when I went to the school counselor and I told him, I said, you got my age wrong there. He goes, what? I said, yeah. I said, I was born in 54, not 56. And he goes, damn typos. And he crossed it out and he made 54. And then when he took the boys down to go in the service, he took me down with him. Now, here's the thing. I didn't want to go in the Army because, to me, that was like, I don't know, it just, the Army. I mean, you'll get the cartoons of Sad Sack, and it seemed like they were like, I don't know, to me it was like, if you couldn't get anywhere else, you basically went Army type thing. I wanted to go with Marines because I had a lot of friends going Marines. But I'll be honest enough, I didn't think I was tough enough to go in the Marines. Yeah. I just didn't. And you looked at the guys who were there at the recruiting center, and they were all much bigger than me. But I'm still a small guy. Air Force, I didn't want because that's what Wetmore had been in. So I couldn't be in that. Yeah. And actually, he was, at the time he joined, he was actually in the Army Air Corps before it actually became. So it's kind of like Army and Air Force, both are his.
Why would you want to follow in his footsteps?
So my thing was, Navy was the farthest from the Air Force as I could get. Now, funny enough, I'm living in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm living in Fresno, California, in the San Joaquin Valley. We're not really beach areas. We're not really by the ocean. At this point, I'd only been to the ocean like twice. But I could swim. I used to swim in the canals in Arizona. So I went to go join the Navy. I did the testing. They do make you do a battery of tests to kind of find out what your level is to where they can put you.
Yeah.
And one of the guys qualified to become a nuclear power machinist mate because he was like right there at the top of everything. And mine was pretty high. And so the guy goes, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't want to kill anybody. So I don't want to kill him. He goes, well, we got corpsmen. Well, I didn't know what corpsmen meant because I never heard the word before. Army medics I knew, but corpsmen. So he explains to me that basically we are what Army medics are times 10.
Right.
Yeah. And once you're trained in that, you can then come out and be working this and working that. So that's what I signed up to do. But at the same time, funny enough, being from an island, son of the sea, I really wasn't looking forward to being on ships, right? Because I really hadn't been on boats and ships. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have fear of the water, but just boats and ships and stuff. So I thought, well, I could get attached to the Marines. Yeah. So I might be on boats and ships for a while, but really I'm with my Marines. Yeah. And plus, most of the friends of mine going in the Marines, I figured I might be with them as well because I'd run into them, And I know that with the Marines, they used to have a thing where the Marines would say, you give a Marine a gun, he'll fight his way to hell. You give him a corpsman, he knows he's coming home. Yeah. Because they know, because corpsmen at that time we were referred to as death cheaters, for the fact that we saved so many lives and that's. So anyway, so that was the thing, is me getting involved in that. And then, as you'll see in Dr. Wetmore's statement,
Dr. Wetmore.
I was not expected to, because I was so late in the time of going in, 72. I went through 2 years of training, jumps training, scuba training, my field training, field medical service school training, all these different things. It's not something you get trained and then you get thrown out there, do it. And plus the fact is, when I went in, I was only making $188 a month, But I got paid extra pay for hazardous duty pay, overseas pay, jump pay, scuba. You get extra money. You get married, you got extra money for being married. So to do all that, even 4 years later, I was only making just under $1,000. I mean, not making a fortune here. You have to have time and grade and all this stuff.
Get by money.
Get by money. So the thing is that I mean, I think base pay at that time was like $600, and then everything else added on, so it was like still under that. But Wetmore says in his statement, like I said, when you read it, you'll see that he said that he used his contacts to get me sent. And then, even though I'd been injured, he applauded himself for the fact that it was because of his great tutelage and thing that I was able to survive. So he was taking his accolades out of that, and that's why I'm saying, when you read this thing, there's going to be moments when you want to just reach through the paper and slap him.
That's what I want to do now.
But every psychologist that I showed that to said this guy is a certified psychotic sociopath who should never be around children. Straight up, this is not what this guy should be. So that's why once people started reading his statement that we got, and we got it through Homeland Security, because he wrote this stuff and he sent it to INS at the time, because ICE hadn't come about yet, Homeland Security, Immigration and Naturalization. So he wrote this and said that I should be kicked out of the country because I illegally came in the country, I illegally remained, I used the name of a U.S. citizen that he gave me, right? But he pointed all this, and then he even used the fact that I joined a motorcycle club that, that was showing that I was, not a true American. Everything he could, right? Yeah. So immigration, when they were doing their thing to deport me, they sent these to my counselors. They're the ones that got a hold of me and said, "Oh, here, this is what we got from immigration." I'm like, good. So I learned a lot about my own background from reading his stuff, right? But he sent 70 supporting documents with this. I didn't get all the documents, but I got a number of them. and like I said, it's one of these things where I was angry, and like I said, it took me 3 tries to read through this whole thing because I couldn't believe that I had all this going on in the background and didn't know what was going on, didn't understand, because he's the one that talks about having set us up for things. But anyway, so I went in, I served with my Marine guys, got wounded.
Where were you shot?
Well, here's what the deal was. I was wearing a chin strap on the helmet.
Okay.
Big, steel pot. Luckily, it was American made, which meant there was slag in it. It wasn't perfect.
Right.
And a bullet hit the helmet, and it went to the helmet and it ran up. It didn't go in my head, but right here in the right light, you'll see.
I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah. So what happened is it kind of peeled back the skin there, but the concussion of my head doing this from the round, I had bruised brain and swelling, and I went into basically a coma. But when people saw it, they saw this blood rushing down on my face. Thought I'd been shot in the head. But so that was the injury that I had received, right? But I was only there a short time. But the thing was that during that time I did care for my Marines like I was trained to.
At that time,
yeah,
it wasn't chaotic as what they say it was in Vietnam.
it was very chaotic because everybody was trying to get the hell out. Everything.
You see, like Chuck Norris films.
Well, the thing was, the thing was, I don't know if the hill people, what they called Mondiard, was like the native people, and that was part of what we were doing, was just getting them out, and so it was just getting the people down and out. But these were people who had helped the U.S.
Yes, right.
This is the whole thing.
If they were left behind, they would have died.
They would have been killed. They're not died. They'd have been killed. They'd been hunted down and killed. So this is the thing. Well, when I got back, my first job was at Camp Pendleton, processing these people. And the funny thing was,
refugees.
They're refugees. But here's the thing. Can you recognize a person from, say, East Hartlepool from a person from West Hartlepool?
Not really.
They don't look different. They don't talk different either, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. South Vietnam, North Vietnam. There were South Vietnamese guys who worked for the U.S. by day and then became Viet Cong at night.
Right.
All right? They had family from the North. There was all this kind of stuff. So anyway, when you bring these people in, well, tribal groupings and people, they recognize each other. They know, hey, no, you're not from here, you're from there, like this. So at Camp Pendleton, they called it a reservation, but it's a big, huge base. And they had all these guys there. So what happens when people got put on the plane, they go, okay, what's your name? And you'd say, John Wynn. John Wayne, okay, so you got Wynn down there. Wynn's a very common name. It's like Jones. Right? But the thing is, guys, people gave you names getting on and gave you a different name coming off.
Right.
You might be coming on as a single guy, but he's got, his sister and a couple of his girlfriends or whatever. You might have a family thing, and you suddenly become part of their family. Because as families, you get more benefits when you got over than the single person. So now, and you can't tell, And so they got off and they put these, but they had them in Camp Pendleton, and they started having these fights because they had all these people intermixed, and they had to start separating. And then you go to check them, and the number of people that came over with TB, because you give them chest X-rays. But I remember one particular was they had brought this old lady in, and we had women core waves, which are core men, but women that were treating the women stuff. So they're not being assaulted type thing in their deal. And I remember that one core wave comes out and calls to a bunch of us guys, says, "I need you guys to come see this because I'm not sure." We walked in, and you're looking at this woman. She's probably in her 80s, a little short, woman, scared to death. You can see she's shaking. They've done the chest X-ray, and there's this big square gray shadow under one breast.
Oh, no.
Now, if you know anything about nature, you don't have straight lines normally. So you're looking at this going, this definitely can't be TB, and we don't think it's lung cancer. And so they had to actually physically restrain her so they could look. And it was some C4 because she'd been told that she'd be gang raped and all this stuff like. But the thing is, she didn't have a way of detonating it. She just had it there. But I mean, it's just the idea that nobody noticed this again. And then we had a lady who was this like really well-to-do lady, and she was the French Vietnamese blend, so she's taller and stuff. And turned out she had like a cosmetic case full of like jewels and gold and stuff. Her husband had been a banker, and he got all this stuff out. He didn't make the plane. And so she was able to, buy favors and stuff. But you'd have problems where every once in a while, one of the families would be tired of waiting for things, and they would disappear. So when they disappear, you have to go look for them. You get in the Jeep and you go out what they call outriders. You're like 5 miles from where they are. You see them setting up a hooch. They've somewhere got a piece of corrugated tin. They've got some wooden crates and stuff. They're making a little house out here. And you're like, where'd you find this stuff? And you have to bring them back and stuff. But what the U.S. was doing is that they gave them very substantial assistance in getting them into a house, getting them money for cars. So you get 8-10 people in the house, and they all get jobs, and they all start putting money together, and they buy a business, and then they keep working that one, and they work another, and then they get another business. And the house, they weren't having to pay the loan like you would take out a loan. Well, no, theirs was interest-free loan, and they were paid. The house was half paid for when they started, right. And like they give them like $5,000 for a car. Where you can go down, you get 2 cars from a used car lot, and the guy who's selling them is going to make sure he gets all that money out because anything not spent goes back to the government. And so you suddenly had the Vietnamese taking over a lot of the small corner shops, starting little restaurants, starting different. And so now they're progressing and stuff. And there were a lot of people upset that were not getting that same kind of assistance and aid. But that had served in the military. They're like, wait a minute.
It goes on now in the UK, doesn't it?
And
from Afghanistan, they've been to Iraq and they're on the streets and they're getting no.
And they're not getting any help.
People who are coming from Iraq and Afghanistan.
It's well, but now, like I said, now those Afghan, and Iraqi people are upset because now the Ukrainians are super venting them.
Jamie's books. So if you could tell us a little bit about what they're all about, Jamie.
Okay, well, the first book is called 34 Years in Hell. And it basically tells my story of leaving the Isle of Man at 6 months old, my trip through Canada into America, what happened to me as a child, my being sold to a family, replaced a child that went missing in their care, my going into the military, then going into prison, and the people I met, Charles Manson, Ed Kemper, Herbie Mullen, the Chowchilla kidnappers, stuff like that. Then it goes all the way through my prison time up until I get deported back to the UK in 2018. And it's available at Waterstones and W.H. Smith, though you might have to ask them to order it for you, but it's on their catalog listing, as well as on Amazon. It's sold sold about 60,000 copies in a little over 2 years.
It's doing well.
It's an audiobook form, paperback, and ebook. But it's doing well. But because of it, I had a lot of people ask about questions about things in it. And so that's what my second book came out was, even though it's a standalone book, Behind the Granite Walls, it can stand alone, but otherwise, if you read the first book, this one should answer questions that you might arise from there. It does have some of the stuff that was edited out of the first book by the publisher added back into it, but it covers things, tattoos, prison gangs, some of the day-to-day life things, including parole board hearing goes. I document my 9 parole board hearings in it. And the way things went down, things said, and such. But so it's only available in paperback and ebook at this time. But it's also Waterstones, W.H. Smith, and Amazon. Though I understand there are probably other little book sites that may also carry both of them.
Brilliant. Thanks. You have to check that out, guys.
Check them out, guys.
Well, what I'll do, Jamie, we will, like say, we've had a little breather there, so we're going to jump right back on your story. I mean, we spoke about your time in Vietnam,
right.
and I do know that you suffered from post-traumatic stress, which we will talk about shortly. But Vietnam, I mean, at that time, I think it was probably hell on earth, Vietnam. And to be a medic over there as well, that's got to be one of the hardest jobs.
You see, you're running to it, not away from it, and if you're a medic, you know, you're running towards it.
Yeah, well, that's the corpsman's duty, and is to take care of his men, and if they get wounded, you run through the gunfire to get to them. You know, you can't do less. But that's one of the things is that you'll find that there's a lot of guys who go through the hospital corpsman training, realizing they can't do it, and so they just stay hospital men, which hospital men stay on hospital ships or stay in base hospitals. Corpsmen go with the Corps, go with the Marine Corps. So it's what, and that's why I say we were referred to as death cheaters, because the idea of trying to snatch them back from, dying and stuff. But
I hate to bring this up, Jamie. Like you say, I do know you suffer from post-traumatic stress. But people do want to know, if Vietnam War, you're a medic. I mean, could you explain to us just maybe a couple of challenges that you faced over there? I know it sounds
my job was all encompassing, because technically I'm the only person in the field, and that concludes being surgical. So I mean, it was the idea that you would take a bullet out of somebody. You might have to work on doing an emergency amputation if somebody had their stepped on something. I did take a number of bullets out of people. I did do an emergency appendectomy in the field.
Is that for the...
No, that's tracheectomy. No, appendectomy, take the appendix out from an explosion too close, caused damage, and so had to end up doing that. Shrapnel went in. I did have to help amputate a foot one time of a guy who had a mine go off, and shrapnel took his foot. But at the same time, I also delivered I did some babies.
Really?
So life and death is right in the same cradle and stuff. But the thing was that one of the tragedy was you'd go out and you'd go to a village and you'd treat people for, flus and fevers, and sometimes, like, the kids used to go out and collect up scrap metal, a lot of times brass and stuff like that, to sell. And sometimes they would get their feet cut, and so I'd have infected feet that I'd clean up and stuff. And that kind of led to the thing was that we were, at one point, I'd been through a few places. We're coming back down, and we heard a little voice yelling "Boxy," which is basically a term for doctor in the Vietnamese. And out of the brush come this kid, and when I turned and looked at him, he recognized me, that I'd been there to help, them and stuff. And what they had been doing is they would take a shit-covered knife, fecal-covered knife, and they would stab the guy in the kidney.
Oh man!
And the idea was that takes the corpsman out of the game.
Oh, sure.
But he saw me, and he stabbed me in my thigh rather than in my kidney.
Right.
But as he ran off, and this will be upsetting to people, but my Marines cut him down.
I was just going to say this. What he showed him.
But the thing was that. He was about 8, 9 years old. But the thing is that, and in a lot of people's minds, that's a war crime. You're killing children and stuff. But you don't understand.
The kid's a potential killer.
But see, in Vietnam, before my time, reports I'd read was, you used to have shoeshine kids that would come up and get Joe, put your foot on here, and they'd have a bomb inside the shoeshine. When you stepped on it, if you stepped off, it'd blow off. Yeah. And women used to hand babies to GIs that were wired.
Man.
So it's a thing when war is not a pretty thing in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. And like I said, you look at Afghanistan, they had the IEDs. And the thing about Vietnam, they used to do similar things, and they know Americans are great tourists. So Americans see something shiny on the ground, they're going to pick it up. So it's just that kind of thing. But luckily, I was able to flush out my leg, and I did my own suturing on it. And though it was quite stiff, he luckily didn't have a long blade. It's about a 2-inch blade. But I always, kind of find humor in the fact when you see a film and some guy gets stabbed in his leg, pulls a knife out and takes off at a dead run. No, immediately the muscles tightened up, and I mean, it just didn't want to function well. So it's that kind of thing. I think that for a lot of us, the thing about Vietnam was we went because the stories we were told is that if we didn't do this, communism was going to come to America and we'd all be eating fish head and rice and all that kind of stuff, propaganda stuff. And in actuality, as we've learned long throughout it, is that we were fighting for corporate interests, Coca-Cola and other companies that had their vested interests and stuff in it. And it had very little to do with, the freedom of people and stuff. And
it's all about the money.
It's all about the money, basically. And then the ideology, you're trying to go and save these people and convert them to your way of life. And there are a lot of people that, quite honestly, don't want to be converted to your way of life. But somehow you convince everybody that you've got the right idea, and that's what you got to do. So that type of thing. But even though I was there a very short time, coming back, I saw a lot of the.
Yeah, like you said, we spoke earlier. We see you got shot and put in a coma, and that's when.
Yeah, I got the head wound. I went to. They shipped me out. I went to a Sydney hospital, and then I was transferred back to Northern California, and then back down to my hospital there in San Diego, Balboa, and but it took just even though that little injury, because it dealt with the head and the swelling and all that stuff, and like I said, I pointed out that you in the right light you can see where the skin got pulled back from a bit of the shrapnel, and luckily because head wounds bleed really badly, it's because all the capillaries and stuff, but at the same time they kind of heal back together reasonably well without having to do a lot of. They basically just laid it back in place and bandaged it up, and it just took, it could have not taken, and then they'd had to do something else there, but it did. But the thing was that when I first basically came cognitive of things, I had trouble actually holding the pen to write with, and things, and I had vision blurred and things like that. And it was actually a couple of months before I was right again to where I could be put back to duty and stuff like that. But it wasn't seen to be, life-threatening, life service ending type thing. The biggest problem for me with that was, like I said, when we came, I had friends of mine. I have one buddy who would come back and somebody had thrown, like a can of soup or a can of stew or something, and hit him in the head and actually caused him brain damage to where he no longer he has to have a stick. He had basically one whole side of his body stopped functioning and stuff because they were upset that he was served in the military and things. But
did you get much of that, Jamie, when you come back from the military? Did you get any
No, because I had gone through the hospital thing, and so I was just off the street. But I mean, I had friends from high school that used to yell at me for having joined up. Oh, you baby killers! Oh, you just this, that, and spit on you. I had a lot of spit thrown on me. And again, didn't have people saying welcome home. Good, thank you for. Didn't have that. First time I think I got told thank you for your service was when I was in prison at and joined one of the veteran groups that we had there. And, so we're talking, more than 25 years later, somebody finally said that to me. Yeah. And, it meant a lot to me. But at the same time, the thing is that, you had people that said that, well, it really wasn't a war. Kind of like Korea was a police action. Korea was not a war. So, and the thing with Vietnam is just so political and so many different people and, yeah, I mean, it was just not a good thing all the way around. Am I sorry I served in the military? No, I'm not sorry I served in the military. Did I want to be involved in that kind of stuff? No, I didn't want to be involved in that stuff. But unfortunately, that's kind of the way it works out. It's just, certain things. Yeah, I mean, I signed up to help my men, and in my way of thinking, I basically did. I think that one of the worst things about it was that when I got back and I learned that one of my high school friends had actually been killed. And he'd had it was a truck exploded that he was involved in and killed him. They didn't list it as combat related, but service related. And the big difference is the amount of money the family would get. Yeah. And but the thing was that what they do in the U.S., what they'll do is if you lose somebody, they'll usually send a couple of members of the service over to your house with your person's belongings and knock on the door, and they go, "We want to thank you for your son's service. Here's his belongings. Thank you very much." Salute you and walk away. Well, because I knew this guy, I asked if I could go with him, and I went with him, with the officer, into the family, because I knew the family from high school. And in a way, it was a good thing, and in a way, it was bad. The family was happy to see me and was glad that I stayed after the officer left. To tell him what I could tell him.
Yeah, what you knew about it.
But at the same time, he had a younger brother who was angry at me and has been angry all of his life at me because he knew I went in to be a corpsman to help, and he was mad that I didn't save his brother. But I was nowhere near his brother. I hadn't seen his brother since we went on the plane down to boot camp. But he needed someone to hate because of his lost brother. I mean, yes, he got his brother's Mustang. Yes, he got all of his brother's trophies. He got everything his brother had left for him to take care of. But he didn't have his brother. And he was one of the ones, he was like 8 years younger than his brother and idolized him. You know, he just wanted to be his brother. You know, because his brother took him to the films all the time, would take him on dates, would spend the time with him fishing, all that stuff. To not have that brother was more than he could bear. And I was the best face he could, so I accepted that.
Yeah, you accepted it. I would have accepted it. Can we touch on the PTSD? When did that start? I mean, I have friends. I've got actual friends of mine who are in Afghanistan, a couple of tours.
Well,
and they suffer from it, and it's bad. Like,
well,
it can get bad.
I got diagnosed with it, basically in '77. Right. Okay. And I'd been out of the service since the '76. And what happened is I went to a haunted house. Some friends of mine in October took me to this haunted house. At that time, my marriage had already fallen apart. I had my son. So I had my son being watched by somebody.
Halloween.
So a bunch of
Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween. And there was one, it was put on by a group called Christian Life. It was supposed to be a Christian thing, and it was a charity. They could make the money for the charity type thing and stuff. So we go in, and as we've kind of talked about, is that I don't have that fear factor that some people have. And one of the things I know is that werewolves and vampires and zombies don't exist. So I don't get frightened of things like that don't exist. But what happened was they had me in the lead, and there was like 7 people behind me, a couple of gals and some of my buddies and stuff. None of the buddies I had with me had ever been in the military. They had, one reason or another, either they were in college or they had not been old enough or whatever. So they weren't. I was the only one that was a vet. We're going through, and the guy jumps out, and they're all screaming, and I'm just like going, yeah. Until we come through where they've got this plastic sheeting, we step through this thing, and there's strobe lights going off, and I hear all this combat noise. I hear choppers, I hear gunfire. I smell smoke in the air. I look over and I see 2 Viet Cong guys behind a 30 caliber machine gun shooting rounds, and you can see the shells bouncing out and stuff. And I look over here and I see U.S. Marines, being shot down.
Wow.
And I don't know what actually happened. I only know what they told me happened. But apparently I had jumped over the little barrier they had keeping us from it, and I had attacked the 2 VC guys.
Right.
And apparently I thought I had a knife because I was hitting one with the flat of my hand in his chest. So apparently I thought I had my K-bar, and I was stabbing him. And the other guy I basically had in my other hand, and I was choking the hell out of him. And it took about 4 grown men to pull me off him and get me outside. And sheriffs got called. There were people from the venue, there were my friends, and everything. And these sheriffs come up, and this one sheriff came up, and he had the Globe and Anchor, the U.S. Marine Corps thing on his thing. And one of my friends went up and said, "Look, let me tell you what's the deal. He's a corpsman. He just, this," and running all down to him. and the guy was a sergeant. He was the shift sarge. And he walked over and says, "Hey, Doc," which is what they commonly call a corpsman. He goes, "Let me take you to the hospital. Let me take you to the VA hospital. I don't want to take you to jail." And they took me to the hospital, and they put me in for 2 weeks observation. And my friends watched my son, and they diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder at that point.
Yeah.
And
so you've had a lot of years of
I had. Well, the thing is, actually, while I was in prison, they've diagnosed me with 3 events of PTSD: my childhood,
right,
my military, and my prison.
Yeah.
You know, they said each one brought on a different type. Yeah. But what ended up being even worse with the PTSD is I was had a lady named Dr. Eels, and she had been one of the founding type people in the studies of shell shock, which is World War II stuff, and PTSD. Right. And she was working at the VA hospital there in Fresno. She came down and saw me in San Diego, right? And she said, "Well, I want you to come to these groups and stuff." I'm like, "I don't want to come to these groups and stuff like that." And she goes, "Please, I think it would help you a lot." So, okay. So, anyway, so I get on my Harley. I'm all dressed in my leathers because I'm running a bike shop at the time. I'm with a bike club. Yeah. I go to the VA hospital. I get in. I go in the elevator. Go up to this floor they tell me to. And I walk into this room. They tell me to. And everybody, I look in this room, and this room was used for many things, but it had mirrors all the way around the room and had like bars for you to hold yourself up to do exercise and stuff. And everybody in that room had injuries I could see. Missing a limb, napalm type burns, laid on a bed, they couldn't get up, they were paralyzed in wheelchairs. And I'm seeing myself in the mirror behind them. And there's nothing wrong with me. And I felt I was being dishonorable to them. How dare I come into this room and say, I've been hurt. These men gave so much. How dare I take anything from that? You know, I basically doffed my cap and said, "Thank you, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place." And I walked out and got on my bike and left. And when I got called, I told her, I said, "I don't even deserve to be in that room with those men." I said, and she goes, "Oh, no, they would understand." I said, No, you don't understand. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'll deal with it. And she goes, "Well, I could get you some medication." I'm not taking pills because at the time I didn't like pills. I never smoked cigarettes. I was never really a drinker, and I've never done any kind of drug that I wasn't prescribed directly for. So I just didn't want anything from her. So she goes, "Well, do me a favor. You live out in the beach area." And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, would you go down here?" And she gives me an address to go to. And funny enough, it was right on the road, close to where the club bar that we used to hang out. And there was like a Mexican restaurant called Roberto's across the street. And it was a health food store ran by these 2 hippie girls. And I knew the place because these girls worked topless in their health food store. And all these big biker guys would go in the shop and come out with guacamole and bean sprout sandwiches and things like this, you know.
The tips out.
Yeah, they did. But the girls never came out. They were inside the stick. But you go in there and they had a little counter, and these big burly biker guys would go in there. Could I get one of those sandwiches? And they would try to figure out what sandwich took longest to make in order. And then they'd come out and they would just dump it in the trash when they came out. But they went in there, you know. Well, they ran a meditation workshop. And so I went down and to learn calming meditational type stuff. Well, let me tell you, that's not the place to learn calming meditation thing. You know, because you get there and there's 3 or 4 guys who are all vets who've been referred to this. And there's like 5 gals in there all with their breasts hanging out telling you, okay, close your eyes, think you're a tree, feel your roots going down, and everybody's got their eyes crescent. You know, But I mean, I did learn the basic understanding of meditation, which I have used in prison to really work on my PTSD. And that was one of the things that when I came back to this country, I was actually sent to go see about trying to get help, counseling, something. And I went to 5 different places in London, kept getting referred to the next one. I went to the first one. I walked in, and the guy goes, yeah, we're here to help. Exactly what is your condition? I said, well, I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder ×3, and I ran it all down to him. He's sitting there and staring at me. I've talked to him for about probably 30 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, we can't help you. He goes, you know, if you had an eating disorder or if you didn't know how to coordinate your clothing for the day, we could do something. Mm-hmm. And he goes, but maybe these people can. And so he kept sending me around. And I finally went to this one that was supposed to be like the hardcore, we can solve anything type. And the guy says, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, looking at your files, talking to you stuff, you got it well in hand. I don't think we can do any more for you than what you do for yourself. So good luck with that. Yeah. And so I got no help. And of course, in prison, they don't really give you help. But I worked for the psych department for a good number of years. So I was getting, you know, a little bit of stuff on the side, tips on and stuff to help myself out. But quite honestly, I've had 2 minor bouts with PTSD since I've been up. And funny enough, it's been behind with the driving thing, because I had a hard time getting my license initially, because roundabouts were like roundabouts. And the other thing is how narrow the streets in London were with cars parked on both sides, and you got to drive, and somebody's coming the other way, and you're like, and all I could think about is, oh God, I want my Chevy truck back, because I had a 73 Chevy 3/4 ton pickup truck with 1-ton springs and 4-inch pipe bumpers front and rear. You know, I mean, the worst I ever had to deal with was somebody scratching my bumper, and I just pick out some paint and repaint it. But their car would be opened like a can opener. But my truck, I mean, I could push somebody through an intersection if they didn't want to go. You know, so driving, and so those were the real tough things. But you know, and then taking the test, I had to do this hazard perception test. And like I said, I wasn't a computer person, so everything's on computer. So I had to do computer, and then I had to do hazard perception, which is guess who's going to jump out in front of you test. You know, and the first time, one of the tests I was doing is I'm going along, and I see a deer crossing sign here, and I see deer running out across the road, and I'm slowing down. And then I run over the dog that's chasing them. It's like, who'd have thought there'd be a dog in the middle of the woods chasing over here a herd of deer? I mean, you know, what? But when I took my practical test, I took the written test 3 times. I took the practical twice. The first time is I got dinged a few times for the roundabout, and my caution, because I'm being too cautious. But what really threw me and made me lose my first driving thing was just as I was coming back to the testing center, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm counting the points, and I know I'm going to pass this. A gal stepped out from between these 2 lorries, and I stopped. She doesn't have the right of way, the guy tells me. I said, yeah, but if I hit her, he goes, well, that wouldn't be a fail. Yeah, but, you know, the cops might really think that that's not a good thing either. And he failed me because she didn't have the right of way. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't know. So I got my license in 2019, because I had to save up money for my license, my lessons, and I had to save it for my car. I'd say I came back with £5 to start my life with over here, and it took me a while to save up money. I'm sorry, you know, they don't get big money, but when I came back the next lesson, we go through, and we happened to go the exact same route my instructor took me that morning. I mean, everything. So I knew all the little in and outs, and I'm doing it really well. And as I pulled back in, while he's doing the tally up, I took a copy of my first book and dropped in his lap. I said, oh, by the way, you might want to read about me. Now, whether that influenced the fact I passed, I don't know. But I'd like to think I passed on my own merits. But no,
Yeah.
But
What you know, tell you know.
but when I came up here in Newcastle, I had a person in the back seat driving, or in the back seat while I was driving, and a person in the front seat, and they both were disagreeing on which direction I was supposed to be going. Said they go, take a right here, and they point to the left. No, you got to go the other way. Take the third exit. Well, I'm looking at the roundabout, and there's like no third exit I can find, because there's one's just like a little utility room. So it's actually the second exit. And I'm like, but I'm trying not to put it on them. So basically, when I came back to the house, first off, they noticed I got real quiet. I didn't say anything. When I came back to the house, I went up to my office, because I've got a little office where I'm living, and went in there and shut the door, turned on my music, and pounded away on the keyboard, and stuff. But but I have to say, the people understand I have PTSD.
Yeah.
And they try very hard to give me, space when they see I'm just a little stressed. But it doesn't disrupt my day-to-day thing. Good. But when I first got back over here, I was hoping I was going to be able to get involved with groups, like youth groups and stuff that are troubled children, that I could possibly try to relate some of the stuff, because even though I wasn't a kid when I went in, I dealt with a lot of kids when I was in, and and some I couldn't help, some I could, and quite honestly, like I said, I don't want to see anybody go to prison if they can help it.
Well, you mentioned prison there. I think we'll come into that part of the story.
I was just going to say that,
because
my son only just at 20, he's nearly 25, being diagnosed with ADHD, only just.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like,
that's a terrible thing, and that's a problem I saw with a lot of guys inside, is that people think when you have that kind of a condition, or if you have a type of autism, like I had a celly who had Asperger's and stuff, that you don't want to learn, and you're being disruptive, or you're just trying to be a problem. No, you have a problem. You need help, and I think that in this country, as well as the U.S. and stuff, people don't really take the time to watch the kids and talk to the kids and try to find, because I've known guys who couldn't read because they were dyslexic. Half the letters are going the other way. They can't make them out. Had they had intervention early, they wouldn't have been in some of the problems they were in. But so many guys I knew got diagnosed after they got to prison, and funny enough, I found more compassionate teachers in prison than I knew of guys on the streets had. And the thing was, I did tutoring for people, even when it wasn't my job. Guys used to come back and ask me, "Can you help me with this, help me with that?" And basically what I tell them, if you'll put the effort in, I'll put the time in. Because I really, most people will tell you that only in the first year or two was I kind of a prick to people, because I was a bit angry at myself for getting in the situation. But then I started seeing other people that, in my case, I felt were a lot worse. So I started reaching out to people and trying to help.
Yeah, well, my son, when he came in and he said my dad would diagnose me with ADHD, I was like, okay, that explains a lot. Doesn't it? He knows what I'm talking about. That explains a shitload of things, son. And he's got the help now, he's on the medication as well.
He's doing well as well.
And the next day, I was like, I'm talking to a different kid. The very next day, his medication, I'm talking to a different kid. Weird, strange. Now, how many kids must be out there? They're getting into trouble, they're doing things and there's nobody helping them. There's nobody looking at them and saying there's possibly something wrong with you.
Right. And sometimes it's also a thing is that some of them will find something that they really enjoy. And then people will put them down for it. Oh, that's a terrible drawing. You can't draw. Well, I couldn't draw when I first went to prison. I was too much doing stick figures. But I did some drawings that appeared in the Royal Festival Hall, and one that sold for 270 quid, called Nowhere Man. You know, but I've done them, and I put them on the Facebook. I put a bunch of my drawings there.
I think I've seen a couple of pictures on here.
Yeah, but I tell people that, look, I don't call myself an artist.
Yeah.
I just find that this helped me.
Therapeutic.
It's very therapeutic.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, it's like my little. You've seen my little wooden characters I carved out of lolly sticks. There's one little motorcycle guy sitting next to a 50p coin that I put on there. I'm going to put some other side guys because I had guys that like to play Dungeons and Dragons in prison. So I would make little dwarves and dragons and elves and ogres and all these, and I would make these little things for them and give them to the guys because they couldn't get the characters in prison. So I made them for them. But at the same time, it's therapeutic for me because I'm doing things for myself that just give me time to do stuff. But the little motorcycle guy, he's the only one I got left. Right. But at one time, I had 15 of them in my cell, and I had them sitting up on a shelf. And I went out and I came back, and 14 of them were gone. Mm-hmm. Right? So I went to the guard and said, "Hey, what the hell? Who went in my cell and took my guys?" And he goes, "Oh, this is for you," and handed me a slip given to me by a sergeant, and said that due to the fact that I was making a motorcycle gang, that he had to break it up before it became disruptive, and so they took 14 of my little carved characters, right? And I caught the guy later, and I said, "Look, you know, if you'd wanted one, you could have said something. I'd have made you one." Yeah. You know, I said, and he goes, "Well, I didn't think you'd mind." You know, I just spent all that time carving. Yeah, I kind of mind if you just come take them. You know.
Yeah. So because we mentioned prison a few times now, but we haven't even got touched on the part of how we got there, what happened. So we'll go into that.